Wanting some flavour to your runs? You know, to spice things up if you got some kick for those final miles of a long run? Hey, I'm Jack, an everyday runner hoping to help others learn a little bit more about running. Today, I'm going to be talking about how to build a shoe rotation and some tips to building your own. Let's get into it. Now, in this first part, let's talk about what exactly a running shoe rotation is. Essentially, it's a rotation of shoes designed to suit a variety of different run types, from your long runs to your speed sessions, all the way through to those slow recovery runs. Now, each shoe that goes into this rotation will have some slight differences, usually in that structure, that cushioning, and their supports. A key to building a running shoe rotation in the first place is to help with extending the longevity of each of your running shoes. For example, a runner who's currently training for the marathon distance will obviously go through a lot more kilometers than someone training for a 5k distance. Hence the benefits of having multiple pairs of shoes to reach your weekly mileage over the course of a long-term training plan. Over time, running shoes will experience compression and deformation over the course of its lifespan, usually happening in its midsole. Allowing your running shoes to decompress between runs can assist with restoring the cushioning to its original properties, and therefore extending the longevity of your shoes. Now, while the basis of setting up a running shoe rotation can seem very simple, there are some pros and cons to consider here. Let's start with the pros. Obviously, the first one being in extending the lifespan of each of your shoes. The more shoes you have in a running rotation, the better. Secondly, having a running shoe rotation provides options for a variety of different trainings and conditions you may be training in. If there's rainy or snowy conditions out where you are, opting for a more grippier shoe can be beneficial in those circumstances, compared to relying on just one set of shoes to get you through an entire training plan. It can also help with strengthening your legs and your feet. Why? Because each different running shoe will have a slightly different structure, causing the little muscles in your legs and your feet to work a little bit harder to adapt to that different structure. And in a way, you're causing them to have to work a little more by changing your shoes each time you go out for a run. When in comparison to using just one set of shoes, your muscles are likely to adapt to that one exact specific shoe. The only other factor they'll really have to adapt to is the training load that you put yourself under, usually as the training load increases as the plan progresses. Lastly, having a shoe rotation can reduce the risk of injury. As I mentioned, your legs and your feet are constantly adapting to each of the different shoes in the rotation, causing your muscles to get stronger as a result. Now, while there are some amazing pros to building a shoe rotation, we also must factor in the cons. Arguably, the biggest con to building a shoe rotation in the first place is the price, because as us runners know, there's a new shoe released somewhat every month, it seems, throughout the year too, with the shoe technology changing at a rapid pace. That's why we see the first, second, and third editions of these carbon-plated racer shoes. And hey, it can dent your pocket with the limited lifespan of carbon-plated shoes. Secondly, not all runners will actually benefit from building a running shoe rotation. And I'm mainly talking about those that are picking up running on a casual basis, so maybe 1 to 3 times a week, compared to someone looking at training for a fast 5k, 10k, half marathon through to a marathon where mileage becomes an important factor to improving. In my opinion, I feel like a running shoe rotation is designed for those who are a bit more seasoned with that running journey and have particular goals they're training for, particularly for those who have a training plan or a coach that assists them. But hey, if you are getting into running casually, it doesn't mean you have to suddenly stop and only choose one pair to last you for your entire running journey. It's entirely up to you. The last con here is the time it takes to transition into each of your new running shoes. As we all experience in a first run in a new pair of shoes, there may be some discomfort. And for every runner, it's different as to when it feels like a shoe's finally been broken into after starting to run in it. But if you're adding 2 or more pairs into a rotation, you just need to factor in that it can take a little longer to be settled into each of the shoes that you've got in your rotation. Alright, so you're sticking around or have jumped to this part of the video to work out how you can build your own running shoe rotation. The first tip here is to think about your running goals that you have before building a rotation, whether it's a particular event you're training for, distance, or even looking at what training plan you're looking at undertaking. Seeing what quality sessions you have in your plan can guide you as to what your second, third, or potentially fourth shoe may look like to cover those types of trainings. For example, I like to use my carbon-plated shoes for my 1 speed session per week in my current marathon training plan. Following on from your running goals, set a particular budget you're aiming to hit, because as I mentioned, you can put tons and tons of money into all the different running shoes out there, particularly if you're training for something like the marathon distance where you're required to also buy gels and additional running accessories over the course of your training plan. But when it comes to your running budget, have most of it set towards your shoes. Consider the weather and the terrain conditions that you're going to be training in. For someone training in wet or snowing conditions, having a grippier running shoe in their rotation can be highly beneficial for those days when it just seems too wet or too snowy or slippery. Though I can't really talk about the snowy conditions here in Australia. Consider booking an appointment with your local running shoe shop specialist to almost do a try before you buy and experiment with the different shoes on the market at the moment. That way you can almost kill two birds in one stone here, having a person to offer specialized running support advice for what shoes to consider, and to be able to try on multiple shoes to work out what exactly you want in your rotation or what feels best for it. And lastly, think about how quickly you typically wear out your running shoes. This can often be the final deciding factor as to how many shoes you'd like in the rotation. There isn't a right number though on how many shoes to have in your rotation. Some have 2 and some can have upwards of 10. It's an entirely individual decision that you will have to make. So there we have it, a little explanation into what a running shoe rotation is and some tips on how you can build your own. Let me know down in the comments what your current running shoe rotation is if you have one. And hey, first video back up on the channel after a big move into a new place, and actually exciting to be in a bigger place to hopefully build up a bit more of a studio and decide to do something with the background here, because this is very basic too, but you'll see that progression over the course of the year as the videos come out. Hope you've all been staying safe and well out there on your running journeys, and hey, let me know what was one highlight of your running for last week. I'm Jack, and I'll see you next time. Catch up.